So,
Deputy Southern?
so before we start, I wonder if I may correct something. I had one simple job to do this morning, which was to announce that the Constable of St Brelade's was on business for the CPA, and I wholeheartedly forgot to do it. So I wonder if we can correct that. I can apologise to the Assembly and the Constable for not remembering to do it. Thank you, sir.
Yes. Thank you, Deputy Ward. Deputy Southern?
Waiting for question time, sir.
Oh, I see. All right, so you're ahead of the game as usual. So the second question period is for the Minister for Social Security, and the first question is from Deputy Southern.
What measures, if any, is the Minister happy to take in order to increase the range of the health access scheme or its equivalent to other groups in society?
Minister.
Sir, I think this is the third time Deputy Southern has effectively answered me the same question. As I've said previously, the health access scheme will be subject to review next year with my wider review of benefits, and we will consider at that point whether it needs to be extended, and if so, to whom and to which types of people.
Thank you. Supplementary.
And could the Minister inform members of what the terms of reference are for this review? Because we get lots of reviews of various types.
Minister.
So we'll review the current criteria of the scheme, the take-up of the scheme. We're then also trying to look at gaps. There are no formal terms of reference because I don't think any are strictly necessary. We will just be looking at the scheme, we'll be analysing it, and we will then make decisions based on extension on an informed and educated basis. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mezek.
Thank you, sir. Could the Minister attempt to provide any kind of justification, moral, economic or otherwise, of capping the contributions made into the Social Security Fund of people who earn above £250,000 a year?
Minister.
Sir, I believe that position has been a feature of our benefits and contributions framework for very many years. I'm sure previous assemblies have agreed it was the right thing to do. I see no reason to change it at this stage. People contributing more may not necessarily withdraw any benefits from the fund, but they are making reasonable contributions into it for benefits that they are unlikely to take themselves. Thank you.
Supplementary, please, sir.
Yes.
Sir, is that the Minister confirming that she believes that a social security fund should only be contributed into it by people who need support and are therefore actually the most unable to pay into it, and she thinks that it is morally right and justifiable to say to our society that the super wealthy are not expected to contribute proportionately the same as the rest of us are, given any super wealthy person is just one or two accidents away from becoming a poor person themselves as well?
Minister.
So that's quite clearly not what I said. What I said was that our system requires everyone to contribute. It requires everyone to contribute up to a certain level. I think it would need something fairly catastrophic for a super wealthy person to become so poor that they were reliant on benefits. Many people contribute to the system at all levels who do not then make any claim on it until such times as they draw their pension, but it provides sickness and incapacity benefits for a whole range of the population. And I see no reason to open that at this stage.
Thank you, Minister. Dr. Feltham.
Thank you, sir. As the Minister with responsibility for delivering the disability strategy, is the Minister confident that the services and processes that are delivered by her department are accessible and inclusive enough for people with disabilities? And for clarity, that definition of disability also includes mental health.
Minister.
I don't know the answer as to whether the definition of disability includes mental health, but I see no reason why it should not. The question of accessibility is something that I've asked my officers to consider, and the whole question of communication and accessibility to all our communications in social security is part of my ministerial plan and is one of my priorities for the coming year. Thank you.
Supplementary.
Yes, sir. Does the Minister consider that there is enough resource allocated within the government plan to enable her own department and other departments to ensure that they are providing accessible and inclusive services, and so that the disability strategy can be delivered well?
Minister.
Sir, I can't talk for other departments, but I believe disability, inclusion and accessibility is part of the ongoing work of my department. It's something we will continue to work on and develop over the course of this term. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. May I ask the Minister, what is the current situation for patients off island receiving long-term medical care, receiving their income support or social security payments? Thank you, sir.
Minister.
That's not a question I've been asked before, so I don't know exactly the answer. I believe, however, sir, that when people are away for a long period of time, payment of benefits will stop because they are funded elsewhere. But I'm afraid I do not know the answer to that question directly.
Supplementary.
Yes, thank you, sir. Would the Minister agree to look at the situation that has been is occurring there? And there may only be a few cases, but there can be some situations where people with long-term medical care, with no fault of their own, get into serious trouble in terms of what's left on the island for them with their income support payments. So if the Minister would commit to having a look at that, I'm quite happy to discuss with her. Thank you, sir.
Minister.
Sir, as I say, I don't understand. I don't have any information or knowledge about the point that the Deputy is making, but I'm more than happy to discuss it with him and make the appropriate inquiries of my officers.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Sullivan.
Thank you, sir. And could I refer to the statements by the Minister of Social Security in the government plan? Just briefly, it says here, supporting workers through increases in the minimum wage and taking actions to improve their rights in 2023. Could she outline what actions she intends to take to improve workers' rights?
Minister.
Sir, I think that's part of an ongoing process. I believe the Employment Forum are already looking at the subject of 0 hours contracts. There is also work underway to introduce parental bereavement leave into the law. Law drafting instructions are in hand, and drafting has been requested for a parental bereavement law, and we are also, as agreed in P78 with Senator Mezek, we are looking at the whole subject of the minimum wage as compared to living wage. So those are the main things that will take up our time this year. But the subject of employee rights is an ongoing thing that we will consider as a department where issues are raised with us.
Thank you, sir. Just to give notice that I will be raising these sort of issues with the Minister.
Thank you. Yes, Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. To improve access to primary care and GP services, and to also reduce people attending A&E, could the Minister reintroduce the previous health insurance exemption scheme, the old HIE scheme, so that will help people with their health care and people with families and children, especially if they're on low income? Thank you.
Minister.
So I'm afraid I don't know anything about the old health insurance exemption scheme. There are further schemes available at the moment. We have the Health Access Scheme, which supports low-income households, including parents and children, to access GPs for, I think it's £12 for an adult, and it's free for children. The low-income pensioners can also access healthcare via the Pension Plus scheme. They can receive help with dental, optical and medical costs through the Pension Plus schemes. But I'm afraid I imagine that health insurance exemption that the Deputy refers to was removed in favour of other different benefits.
Supplementary.
Not at this time, but I'm available to come and talk to you about the HIE scheme. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions for this Minister? Yes, Deputy Fane.
Thank you, sir. During, I think it was the election of ministers by the Assembly, I asked the Deputy her view on allowing recipients of income support to be able to work more hours without seeing an impact. I think it's referred to as a disregard. Could she just update members as to whether she's looked into that and what her current position is? Thank you.
Yes, Minister.
Thank you, sir. That is not something I have currently looked at. We have had quite a number of other priorities in the last couple of months. The income support disregard for earned income has gradually been increased, and it is now up to, I think, 26 pence in the pound. That allows people to continue working and retain more of their income. It's increased quite significantly since income support was reduced. I will be commenting on it later this afternoon when we discuss income support regulations, but that particular point is something that I have not yet addressed. Thank you.
Minister. Deputy Southern.
So it's just gone from me.
Deputy Mezek.
Thank you, sir. Could the Social Security Minister, if she can, give an updated figure or at least her closest understanding to how much of the income support budget is paid out in rent support to claimants who are in the private sector?
Minister.
So I do not know that number off the top of my head, but I'm willing to ask the question of my officers and pass the information on to the Deputy in due course.
Supplementary,
Yes.
sir, that the last figure I was aware of was around about £10 million. So in investigating that, she may be able to find out if it's gone up or down since then. Whether or not it's still 10 millions or in the region of that, does she consider that to be a good use of public money to have a basically indirect subsidy of private landlords charging rent that is at a level that people on lower incomes can't afford it?
Minister.
I'm not entirely certain, sir, that income support meet the whole amount of private rents. We meet the whole amount of Andean rents, but I don't believe we meet the whole amount of private sector rents. I think it's entirely right that if people cannot survive in the island, income support gives them help to do so. I see nothing immoral or offensive about that. The fact that they're having to rent in the private sector is a virtue of our rental market. I maintain it is important that people are given help with daily costs of living, and if that's private rent, I think it's entirely acceptable to help them with that.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Southern.
Thank you, sir. It's come back to me now. Could the Minister inform members whether she intends to examine any overlap between impairment components under income support and long-term incapacity, which seems to cover similar areas?
Minister.
Part of one of my priorities in my ministerial plan this year is a review of our benefit system. The impairment component sits as part of income support, and people in low-income households will receive the impairment component, which may help them both with general necessities of life. It may also help with mobility, and it may also, I believe, help with GP costs. I don't fully understand how that sits with long-term incapacity. I believe that someone on income support may also receive long-term incapacity, but I don't fully know how those two systems overlap, but it is something that will be considered as part of the review we'll be conducting of benefits this year.
Supplementary.
Is it not the case, does the Minister believe, that the long-term incapacity counts as income into the household, and therefore every pound that you receive in long-term incapacity actually comes off income support if you're on income support? So it's a neutral balance. You get no more money.
So Deputy Southern may be right. We have a concept of overlapping benefits, which means that people cannot receive multiple benefits for multiple different reasons. There may be an element of overlap, but I think if someone has long-term incapacity issues, they will be supported either through long-term incapacity or through the impairment component with income support.
Thank you, Minister. There's time for one last question. Deputy Southern.
Thank you, sir. Is the Minister, does the Minister have under consideration the possibility of reducing the time required to go onto long-term incapacity from 12 months to 6 months? Is that the case?
Minister.
That's not something I've given any consideration to. I'm not sure that no one's asked me that before now. We will certainly consider that. Long term, there is a piece of work ongoing at the moment looking at short-term incapacity and our incapacity benefits generally, with a view to helping people work where they can, even if they have an illness. So for some people, working is better than just simply being on long-term incapacity benefits. There will be a review of our overall incapacity benefit system, and again, that's one of my major priorities for this year.
Yes, supplementary.
So, is it not the case that in many cases, people on long-term incapacity are, I use the word encouraged to go back to work, but actually, I mean, are targeted and told to get back in work?
Minister.
Sir, I believe that people on long-term incapacity will only be encouraged to go back to work where they are able to do so within the terms of their long-term illness or health condition. I believe all the research points towards the fact that being at work or having some form of employment, whether that's voluntary, is better for somebody than sat at home watching daytime TV.
Thank you, Minister. That concludes the second period of questions, Ms. Without Notice. We now move on to questions for the Chief Minister. I have Deputy Mezzik, Deputy Bob Ward and Deputy Farnham. Deputy Mezzik.
Thank you, sir. There has been some contention in recent days over whether or not the UK Home Secretary has instructed the Home Office to investigate the possibility of detention centres being opened in the Channel Islands to assist with their, in my view, immoral and outrageous policy of dealing with refugees entering the country. The answer to that may be in a private email somewhere, but perhaps the Chief Minister could assist us on Jersey's end by confirming yes or no whether there has been any communication from the UK Home Office to the Jersey government about this policy.
Chief Minister.
Thank you, sir. And I can give a simple no in response to the Deputy's question.
Thank you, sir. I'm pleased with that answer. And could the Chief Minister confirm that were a request to be made to Jersey's government at some point in the future, that she would give an equally brief answer to them, telling them, no way, not on this island, because we have much higher moral standards than that?
Thank you, sir. The answer would be no, thank you.
Thank you, Chief Minister. Deputy Rob Ward.
Thank you, sir. So on the 8th of October 2019, this Assembly passed P94 2019. Given that we have a new government with apparently new approaches, will this government be enacting the classifications of functions of government proposition that was passed in order that we use measurements of our spend according to international standards that we passed in this Assembly? Thank you, sir.
Sir, if this was a debate that was agreed by the previous Assembly, then, sir, I'm sure that there are movements within the Treasury team to ensure that this is followed through and delivered. And I thank the Deputy for reminding me, and I shall ensure that that's being done.
Thank you, sir. And I recommend that it is done because if adopted, it gives us a way of measuring our spend, sir, against other OECD jurisdictions. For example, the question earlier, sir, would the Chief Minister agree it would help us to actually understand our health spend better in terms of us and other jurisdictions? And it's now 3 years overdue. Thank you, sir.
Once again, I thank the Deputy for pointing this out. And of course, particularly in the area of health, expenditure is always to be looked at carefully, challenged when necessary. And of course, that is exactly one of the reasons why this government did what it said it was going to do, took a pause and has reviewed the plans for our hospital project and, as members are fully aware, has issued its findings today.
Thank you, Chief Minister. Deputy Farnham.
Thank you, sir. Does the Chief Minister agree that the review of the Our Hospital Project report issued this morning is wholly subjective and would have to be subject to further costly and time-consuming processes prior to any future decisions being made by this Assembly before work could start?
Chief Minister.
So, to begin with the end, of course, we will have to come back to this Assembly to ask for your agreement, members' agreement, sir, apologies, for members' agreement as to the way forward. But it is clear from the findings of this report, which has been conducted by an expert in their field with whom I have the utmost confidence, supported by our excellent internal officers who have considerable experience of not only the previous project, but the project before that as well. So they understand the internal machinations, the comings, the goings, the ups, the downs, and they have my confidence, and I hope they will have the confidence of members in this Assembly and the public when they get to read it and see that there has been a considerable amount of thought put into this report in a short period of time, but it provides a clear way forward, a pragmatic solution so that we can get on and deliver health facilities for islanders, which is, of course, what every member of this Assembly wishes to do.
So I did ask if the Chief Minister considered the report to be wholly subjective.
Yes, Chief Minister.
So, no, I think that there are subjective comments, of course, but that is exactly, as I said, and I think I answered the question the first time, actually. So the report has been conducted by an expert in their field who has delivered their findings, and they have delivered a helpful set of findings that provide us with a pragmatic and sensible and deliverable way forward, whereas the previous project was simply not deliverable, particularly in light of the agreement of the previous Assembly as to the funding envelope, which has been way exceeded and is now looking at £970 million and rising as the days go.
I have a supplementary question, sir.
Well, you have answered supplementary.
No, sir, with great respect, I don't think I did. I asked the Chief Minister to answer the initial question, but I do have a supplementary.
Right.
It will be quick. Does the Chief, if the Chief Minister were to turn to page 113, the final page of the report, and read the last paragraph, it says, all of the assumptions laid out in the above model are subjective and should be validated by further detailed analysis prior to ratification of the selection of the proposed option going forward. Thank you.
What's your question, though?
Does she agree with that final paragraph, or has she read that final paragraph, the last final word in the report, which says the report is wholly subjective?
I'm happy to answer and speak to that point, sir. And I'm sure, as you will be aware, as a fine lawyer, caveats are often used. And of course, there is a caveat in this report, and that's been provided to give cover. But I think the Minister for Infrastructure was very clear when he answered questions earlier in the Assembly. And he stated and explained how two different people have used two different measures to go through the figures that have been provided in this report. And so there is a level of quality assurance and reassurance, and I'm confident in the figures. In fact, I would go as far to say, sir, that the figures that are presented in this review are in fact very conservative, and those are the words used by the expert advisor that we've used. For example, if we look at the modelling costs, then the deputy might recognise some of the figures there, which are quoted as the price per square metre of the previous project. And I can suggest, sir, to the Assembly that we will be seeking a much greater level of competition when going out to tender for the next health facility for islanders, and we will be seeking to reduce that price per square metre, and I have confidence in the ability for us to do so.
Thank you, Chief Minister. Deputy Kovacs.
Thank you, sir. I want to ask the Chief Minister around the Code of Conduct for a Council of Ministers. And I'm just going to read the paragraph from the consensus decision-making, which states, the Council of Ministers will seek to reach decisions by consensus based on robust debate and constructive challenge, which will be recorded in the minutes, following which ministers should coalesce around the coherent public position. Does that mean that we're going back to collective responsibility and a decision would have to be made before the minister will actually hear the speeches and debate in the assembly? And what will be the exemptions around this?
So, thank you, sir. Matters that cut across more than one minister's portfolio naturally come to the Council of Ministers to seek their agreement. And our Code of Conduct states it quite clearly, I think, how we expect that to work. And members may have noticed that we are now offering a much greater level of detail in the minutes that are being circulated when they're ready for publication. And those, any moves to a debate, such as described in the Code of Conduct, will be made clear in that publication.
Okay, supplementary.
Yes.
Thank you. So, can the Chief Minister explain as well how this collective responsibility would work when it said that exemptions can be made on manifesto basis, when each of the Council of Ministers stood on a separate, different manifesto, and also can these minutes may be public and available for us?
So we have committed to make the minutes public. That was a decision of the previous Assembly, in fact, I think, and we have chosen, as a Council of Ministers, to ask for a greater level of detail to be put in the A minutes that are there ready for public consumption. To answer the first part of the Deputy's question before I lose my thread entirely, of course, that's what consensus is all about, the bringing together of ideas and finding agreement, despite coming from different ends of a political lens and from different views. But of course, there are caveats in that, and that is generally for matters that are difficult in a member's constituency or a matter of conscience, and also a matter that is particularly defined in their own manifestos that is at odds with the rest of the Council of Ministers.
Thank you, Chief Minister. Deputy Barbara Ward.
Thank you, sir. The government is to introduce a public services ombudsperson. Whilst the introduction of this is most welcomed, may I just ask the Chief Minister a couple of questions? Can the Chief Minister say what expert advice is to be used, and what would be the timetable for this new service, for its introduction? Thank you.
Chief Minister.
Thank you, sir. And I'd be happy to provide some further detail to Deputy Ward, but at the moment we're in the law drafting phase. Those instructions have been sent to the law drafts people, and they are working on a proposition that will be ready to come to this Assembly for scrutiny, to obviously have an opportunity to look at it and make any considerations and recommendations if they feel that that's what they wish to do, and then there will be a debate, and I would hope that the office of the Ombudsperson, hopefully for the Channel Islands rather than simply for Jersey, will be in post towards the beginning of 2024.
Supplementary, sir?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, would the setting up of this new public services ombudsperson include the health service? And if not, why not?
Now, I can imagine what the Deputy's answer to this will be, and has been a matter of some discussion. And I think and I may have to check and confirm this to the Deputy, but I think where we landed was that it would include the health service also.
Deputy Howell, was your light on?
Thank you,
Yes.
sir. It is my understanding that at the moment, several individuals are gathering information at the hospital. Please can members of this Assembly have reassurance that if any member of staff is asked to comment, that they can do so privately and in confidence without any manager being present and without fear of any reprisal. Thank you, sir.
Chief Minister.
Thank you, and I thank the Deputy for her question. I'm aware that there is a Speak Up person appointed who is there and available to take and listen to the concerns of people working in our health service, because we are absolutely focused on transforming our health service and restoring a good culture in our health service so that workers can be happy like they were in the 1990s. And the Deputy speaks so fondly of the culture that was in the hospital and in our health service at that time. So to give further detail, my expectation would be that those discussions are had in private, and that any logs are taken in a confidential basis.
Thank you. Supplementary?
Yes, thank you, sir. It was just that the fact that at the moment, I think there are several, it's not that person that I'm referring to. It's about other people who may be in the hospital at the moment gathering information. And I just was anxious and for the staff to know that they would be able to talk to whoever was asking them questions in confidence and without reprisals. Thank you.
Well, sir, I'm not aware of those people or what they might be working to do, and so I will have to go away and find out and report back to the Deputy and the Assembly.
Thank you. I'm now going to call upon members who have not yet asked a question before coming back to those who already asked a question of the Chief Minister. Conrad Trinity.
Thank you, sir. Would the Chief Minister agree with me that when government breach planning laws and continue with such a breach without any sense of urgency to correct the situation sets a very poor example to the general public?
Chief Minister.
Sir, I would agree. I'm not entirely sure of the circumstances, and I would hope that the description given is not something that is currently underway.
Thank you, sir. If I could enlighten the Chief Minister, I'm referring to the unauthorised raising of a mountain of inert waste at Le Colette, which I understand is being constructed containing cells of toxic waste that will be difficult to remediate if eventually a planning consent was not achieved.
Thank you, sir. So clearly this is something that has been ongoing for some period of time, and I do know that both the Minister for Infrastructure and the Minister for the Environment are cited on this and dealing with it, and I look forward to them being able to provide us with a full and frank update.
Thank you, Chief Minister. Deputy Southern.
Thank you, sir. In a similar case to Deputy Rob Ward, the Minister assured Deputy Ward that she would bring a proposition which has already been passed by this House on one occasion. Would she likewise, similarly, propose to present my ethical home care charter for home care to the House, since it's been successfully passed twice?
Chief Minister.
Well, again, I thank the Deputy for reminding me of that. I have to admit, so I don't recall the detail of it, but I will assure myself that I discuss it with the Health Minister, because I would assume by the title that that is where it might belong.
Or it could, the responsibility might rest with the Social Security Minister.
That completes the time allotted for questions to the Chief Minister. Before we turn to public business, a decision needs to be made about whether to reduce the minimum lodging period in respect of a matter listed on the order paper lodged by the Minister for Social Security. Deputy Mayor, do you wish to make the proposition under Standing Order 26.7 that the lodging period be reduced to allow your amendment to the draft income support Amendment 22 Jersey regulations be debated at this sitting?
Yes, thank you, sir. I do wish to request permission from members for the second amendment to be debated today. Members will recall that when I lodged proposition P94 on 20th September, my report highlighted the possible need for a short lodging period on an amendment. The RPI figure for September was published on 21st of October, and the figure of 10.4% was higher than the government forecasts that had previously been received and on which the first amendment was based. As such, the second amendment makes an adjustment to the proposed income support figures to reflect this very recent RPI figure. While I acted as quickly as possible, members will appreciate that it was not possible to lodge the amendment within the normal 2-week lodging period. I would therefore like to request a shortened lodging period and that my proposition be taken as amended by the second amendment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Is the proposition seconded?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy Rob Ward.
Thank you, sir. And I rise to point out the huge irony of this, given the last Assembly sitting, when amendments brought forward to the mini-budget, where we had such a short time to bring things forward, were rejected by this Assembly in a way in which meant we did not have democratic debate on those amendments. However, I will also say that I and my Reform colleagues are Democrats, and we're here to promote democratic debate, and we're here because we believe that in this Assembly we should be debating these sorts of things, and we should be debating them when appropriate. And so therefore we won't be one of those groups who stand against this democratic debate. Unfortunately, in the last Assembly, that wasn't true for this entire Assembly. But I think as an Assembly, we need to look very, very carefully about the way in which we are going to shorten lodging periods for some, but not for others, particularly when you have ministerial support networks and when backbenchers, and I will call them backbenchers, don't have that support network. Indeed, we don't have any of the things that was promised to us as backbenchers in terms of facilities or staffing and constituency offices. They may have been an over-ambitious promise. I get that, but unfortunately that's the situation we have. So I find this, on one hand, extremely disappointing, given the last debates that we had on propositions brought forward by Deputy Southern. However, we're not going to stand in the way, and we as a party will not stand in the way, because democracy is far too important. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy Ward. Does any member wish to speak on the proposition? If not, I call upon the Minister's reply. Minister.
Sir, I'm not quite sure. I would simply ask, well, I would like to ask the House to accept that my proposition can go through as amended by the second amendment, and that I could then open the discussion on that amended proposition.
Thank you, Minister. Those members in favour of adopting the...
So can I just seek... Sorry to interrupt. Can I seek clarification? We should presumably decide whether we're going to take this, allow it to be taken first, and then decide whether to take it as amended, or is that overly pedantic?
No, absolutely, you're entirely right. Notwithstanding what the Minister said, we are only debating reducing the lodging period so that this matter can be debated today. Is the appel called for, or should we proceed on a standing? Yes, the appel has been called for. I invite members to return to their seats. And members are deciding whether or not the lodging period should be reduced to allow the Minister's amendment to the draft income support Jersey regulations to be debated at this sitting. And I ask the greffier to open the voting. All members with the opportunity of casting their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting. And I can announce the...
which is repeating 3 times, I think.
Yes. Forgive me, Deputy Kovacs, you want to stand up?
It doesn't let him press the button.
Right, all right. Well, I think you probably alerted me to that before I closed the voting. So what was your vote intended to be? 4. Yes, and if... Was the vote not counted, greffier? No. All right, we'll add that to the votes, and I can announce the proposition has been adopted. 45 votes pour and no votes contra and no abstentions. So we now move on to the draft income support regulations lodged by the Minister for Social Security. For the purpose of this debate, the main respondent will be the chair of the Health and Social Security Scrutiny Panel, Deputy Southern. I'll ask the greffier to read the citation.
Draft Income Support Amendment Number 22 Jersey Regulations 2000. The states make these regulations under Articles 5 and 18 of the Income Support Jersey Law 2007.
Minister, do you wish to propose the principles?
Yes, thank you, sir. I would like to propose the income support regulations. These changes to income support were promised in the recent mini-budget. As part of the Chief Minister's 100-day plan, we committed to a range of measures to address the cost of living crisis. A key part of this was that we agreed to further increase the income support components from January 2023 to reflect the September RPI figure. The proposed regulations make increases to income support that have been set in response to the latest economic data. This ensures that Jersey's benefit to support low-income people continues to meet the needs of diverse low-income households, including pensioners, disabled people, those looking for work, and those who don't earn enough to support their families. I will not need to remind ministers that we are living through a period of high costs that is unprecedented in recent times. It is essential that we act to support the most vulnerable people in our society. We have been working hard since the election to respond to this crisis. In most years, the changes to income support levels are made in October, and in fact they have just increased in October of this year. The reasons I committed to bringing changes to this Assembly sooner, as part of the mini-budget, is because of rising costs and also because of the manner in which the changes that were implemented in October this year had to be agreed. In 2021, the States Assembly approved P46/2021. This delivered an increase in income support components in October 2021 and then again in October of this year. The increase for 2022 was agreed early because the timing of the election meant that it would have been impossible to follow the normal process and implement increases in spring 2022. This was an entirely sensible decision by the previous Assembly, but what it does mean is that the October 2022 increase was only based on the economic data that was available at that time. The agreed increase of 2.6% is quite clearly no longer sufficient. It was hoped by all of us, I think, that the costs of fuel and other essentials would not continue to rise as sharply as they did in 2021. This has not proven to be the case. We are continuing to see high rates of inflation driven by events such as the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. The retail price index has exceeded 10% in some areas. After lodging, I have then chosen to amend the regulations as proposed to respond to the latest data. Many households will be concerned about how they will meet their essential costs, and low-income households will feel the effects of inflation more than many others. Government had already reacted to support the most vulnerable in our society by implementing a system of temporary payments known as the Cost of Living Temporary Scheme. These payments provided a much-needed stopgap until it was possible to review the income support rates. The COLS payments will run through to December until they are replaced by these income support increases. The proposed regulations provide a more tailored support to the needs of individual households. If these regulations are approved, we will provide more support across the board by making an overall increase of most income support components of 7.6% above the October 2022 figure. Taken together, this is a combined increase of 10.4% over a 12-month period in line with the September RPI. In addition to the general increase, I also felt it was important to budget for extra support in several key areas. The first is carers. Family members who provide informal care to their loved ones perform an essential role in our community. Although Jersey has a long-term care benefit that supports the cost of paid care packages, income support also offers a special carers component to those people who care for a sick or disabled family member. This can be in addition to other benefits received, such as home carers allowance, or if the family member also receives long-term care. I'm proposing that this component is increased from £51.38 a week to £63.35 a week, which is a 20% increase over the rate as it is now. We will also be further supporting carers through our Care Needs at Home project, where we're exploring extra funding for income support households that have a member who needs long-term care. I hope to announce more details on this scheme soon. The second area where I have proposed extra support is the rate for hostel accommodation. Some of the most financially vulnerable people in our island rely on hostel accommodation, including the properties provided by the Shelter Trust and others. Hostels support people who can't live elsewhere, providing food, a warm and safe place to live, and intensive key worker support to help people get back on their feet. They also deliver outreach service to people who find themselves without a fixed home. I know that the sector is running at almost full capacity and requires extra support to maintain their facilities and staffing levels. I propose, therefore, that we increase the accommodation rate for hostels from £112.35 to £140.49 a week, which is a 25% increase.
Minister, I think you're now moving from the principles to the detail of the regulations, which we'll come on to in due course if the Assembly adopts the principles. I would suggest that you're moving on to the regulations themselves. No wish to restrict yourself to the principles at this particular point.
Apologies, sir. I have one further section. I can return if you wish.
It's a matter for you.
Sorry?
It's a matter for you. Anything else you want on the principles?
Do you mind if I continue?
Oh, yes, of course, if it's on the principles, because we're going to come to the regulations in a moment. When
I think it is still, I believe it is still on the principles, sir.
Yes.
Okay. The second area, broadly, where I'd just like to touch on is private sector accommodation, which refers to Deputy Mezek's question earlier this afternoon. Around a quarter of income support households rent their homes in the private rental market. The level of the income support components are capped at a maximum level for the size and type of each property. This means that families can access an appropriate, decent standard of rented accommodation. In recent years, it has been obvious that rents have risen above the rate of inflation. Jersey has a limited rental market, and for low-income households, rent will always be their single largest cost. It is hard for them to economise on this cost. I've responded to this by proposing that the maximum levels of rental support will increase by 15% above the current levels as of October 2022 from January 2023 onwards. Of course, landlords must also play their part. They are strongly encouraged to avoid inflation increases in rent, and the Jersey Landlords Association has asked its members to exercise restraint when reviewing rents. I hope that this request will be taken on board. Lastly, sir, the total cost of our initial changes was an estimated £6.7 million a year. The subsequent amendment adds a further £860,000 to this. £800,000 to this. The cost will be included in the 2023 Government Plan. I'm sure members will recognise how important it is that these regulations are approved. We will continue to work to respond to the challenges that are facing Jersey people with the cost of living, and I think we all hope that this period of high inflation is a temporary one. Should additional increases in support be necessary, I do not intend to further amend these rates this year. I will consider the scope for additional temporary funding along the lines of the cost of living temporary scheme if it becomes necessary to respond to further unprecedented changes in the economy. Lastly, sir, I would like to thank my Assistant Minister, Deputy Ferry, for helping me develop these regulations. As many of you will know, he has spent many years on the front line of Jersey support for low-income households and continues to have close relationships with those organisations who support the most vulnerable people in our community. I would like to propose these regulations. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Minister. Are the principles seconded?
Yes, sir.
I'll move to debate on the principles. Deputy Ferry?
Yes, sir. Thank you. I would like to support these principles, and I would urge members to do the same. I have paid very close attention to the rising costs and had hoped that we would not see double-digit rise in inflation. Unfortunately, we find ourselves in a period when national and global events have combined to push this figure above 10%. I believe that these regulations will be a solid response to those RPI figures. It is never easy to budget for these costs, but I'm proud that Jersey is in a position to help low-income households in our society. Not every community is so fortunate. We promised in the mini-budget that we'd meet RPI, and we've done that. And I'm especially proud that we found and allocated money to offer more support to some of the most vulnerable households who depend on this benefit. It will make a real difference to give extra money to hostels and to income support households who have a carer. This is far from the last thing that we'll need to do to support carers, but this extra money will make a difference to them. I urge all members to support these principles and regulations, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Tadia.
Thanks, sir. So broadly speaking, I will be supporting the principles, but I was interested to hear that the Minister decided to speak particularly on housing components, because we know that housing components have been identified for a long time as the single biggest cost, and it's a cost which is by and large outside of anyone's control, particularly if they're in the private rental sector, or even in the social renting, because we know there's a parallel there, and that there is an interaction between the two. So my first question is to ask, and I do welcome, incidentally, the increase in the budget. So I think it's long overdue. I think if you look in real terms at what was being allowed as the maximum rental components for people in whatever category of housing, it was probably, I suspect, maybe 10 years out of date in terms of what you could get in the real market versus...
So can I have a point of order?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. The question, it's just really a question, is when do I present my alternative to this particular proposition?
When we come to the regulations.
Thank you,
the principles.
Well, I was just waiting to hear.
It'll be quite soon. It'll be very soon, hopefully.
So I'm mindful, of course, that like the Minister, I could also be accused of talking to the regulations. I think that the housing principles that are in this are so fundamental to what's being provided generally about the cost of living that I think the relevance will also be appreciated. So whilst I welcome that, we have to accept that any subsidy that we give to people who ultimately can't afford to rent in the free market sector ends up in the pockets of landlords. The Minister for Social Security might well be thinking, and I might say the same if I were in her position, well, I can't win, I can't do right for doing wrong, because that is the conundrum that we deal with. By increasing the rental components allowable by 15%, first of all, they may still not be sufficient to meet the actual cost of housing, and the second point is that they end up in the back pockets of landlords. And these may be landlords who own not just one, not just five, not just 10, stop me as we go up the multiples of 5, they may own 50 properties in their portfolio. I've said it in this assembly before, and I'll say it again, that people at Social Security in the past have told me they know of landlords who own in the hundreds of units of accommodation, and they can afford to buy properties outright, and that they can then rely on the taxpayer footing the bill, where people who can't afford to buy or even rent will get their rents paid for by the taxpayer. So that is the reality with which we're dealing. And so I would simply say at this point that this needs to be part of a wider strategy. And when I hear of the fact that this is sounds like a one-off increase and that it won't be going up again this year, but we know that we're dealing with a 10% cost of living increase in this year alone. And so that 15% increase goes only slightly above 1 year's RPI, and it doesn't necessarily deal with the whole decade, I think, that we've seen of price increases more generally, and any future increases we're going to see in the next remaining quarters. So I simply say it there. It's not a criticism of the Minister or the department by any means, because I think she's got to grips with her portfolio very quickly, and she's trying to act to alleviate the cost of living crisis on many individuals. But I'm simply saying that this should be seen as one very small step in a bigger, more complicated and more complex picture that we all need to get to grips with.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. Talking about complex pictures, I would be grateful for the Minister just to explain part of her report that says that the income support increases will replace COLTS, because I understand the basis of COLTS is that generally it can't be claimed by people who are claiming income support, so I'd be grateful if she would address that matter.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak on the principles? Yes, Deputy Iyer.
Thank you, sir. I would like to speak briefly, sir, in support of these regulations and to thank the Minister for bringing them forward for debate. This is a continuation of the work to deliver the mini-budget, which promised that there would be an increase to income support components from January 2023. The task facing the Social Security Minister is never an easy one. Jersey is in an enviable position compared to most other places, but we continue to face tough choices when we meet challenges caused by the global economy. I do not need to remind members that the government spending must reflect what we know about our income. We must look after the most vulnerable members of our society whilst ensuring that we have enough to pay for it. The Minister has struck a good balance here. The proposed changes do a fine job of responding to RPI while targeting extra support to those households who need it the most. I wholeheartedly support these regulations. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. If no other wish to speak, I call upon the Minister to reply. Minister.
Sir, if I could address Deputy Scott's question. COLTS is paid, it's a non-statutory scheme. It commenced in the spring of this year, and it's paid automatically, I believe, to households which receive income support. There is no need to claim it because it's paid automatically. It will go to, I believe it also goes to some pensioner households. But it certainly goes automatically to people who need it. It was introduced because we had available funding this year, and it was brought in as a short-term measure to reflect the fact that income support is normally only increased once a year in October. I can imagine from the timing it was brought in by my predecessor in the run-up to the election to ensure that some prompt action could be taken in the face of the cost of living crisis before we got to the stage of further amendments to income support. And just to address Deputy Taddei's comment that I'd said there'd be no further increases, what I meant by that is that normally we do an increase in October. The October increase is completely inadequate. I think we can all agree that. What I was trying to suggest there is that we will not increase again before the end of the year. So if the next RPI was slightly higher, I wouldn't be intending to. We can't increase income support every time inflation goes up. There is some headroom because although 10.4 is the headline figure that everyone has focused on, or I'm sure everybody's focused on, that includes housing costs. And I think underlying RPIs, I can't remember the exact figure, but it's certainly under 10%. I think it's in the region of 8 or 8.9 or possibly 9%. So by going to 10.4 now, it is possibly slightly higher than the actual rate of inflation, but that gives us a little bit of headroom for the rest of this year.
Thank you. Members wish to proceed on a standing vote, or is the appel called for?
We have the appel, please, sir.
Appel's called for. I invite members to return to their seats. I invite the greffier to open the voting on the principles. If all members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting. And I can announce the principles have been adopted unanimously, 44 votes for. Deputy Southern, does your panel, the Health and Social Security Scrutiny Panel, wish to scrutinise this matter?
No, sir.
Thank you. Now, two amendments have been lodged, one by the Minister and one by Deputy Southern. Minister, unless there's any objection, do you wish to propose the regulation as amended by your amendments?
Yes, please, sir.
Thank you. There is an amendment to Regulation 1, and I ask the Greffier to read the amendment. Forgive me? Oh, forgive me. Do you propose your regulations as amended?
Apologies, yes, I do, sir. I propose the regulations as amended.
And are the regulations seconded?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. There's an amendment to Regulation 1, and I ask the Greffier to read that amendment.
Page 13, Regulation 1.2, for Regulation 1.2, substitute. For paragraph 2.1, rates for basic components, there is substituted 1. The rates payable for the basic components under Article 5.2 of the law are as follows. A. Under Article 5.2a of the law, adult component rate, £115.80. B. Under Article 5.2b of the law, single parent component rate, £45.24. C. Under Article 5.2c of the law, first child component rate, £95.41. D. Under Article 5.2ca of the law, subsequent child component rate, £80.44. And E. Under Article 5.2d of the law, household component rate, £64.52.
Deputy Southern.
Thank you, sir. And we have to start with the fact that this only applies, my amendment only applies to Article 1. It doesn't apply to carers at home. It doesn't apply to hostel accommodation. That's an extra, that's a bonus. And whether or not members accept my amendment, whether or not, that will go through anyway. But the important thing is, and this is a principle that the Assembly sometimes, I might say, sometimes overlooks, which is it's only a real increase if you take into account RPI. RPI plus is real. That means you get real money in your pocket to spend. And over the past 8 years, RPI has increased by 6%, 16%. But as my table on page 4 shows, income support components in Article 1 have not been fully index linked during the interim period. Apart from the first child component, they have fallen behind in value. And whilst the Minister's update of the components goes further than previously in trying to bridge the gap, the fact still remains that it does not take account of incremental increases over time that would have tracked RPI correctly. And if members will look at page 5 of my document, they'll see the graph at the top half, which shows the growing gap for an adult component between actual and RPI. And it shows indeed a growing gap whereby people in 2004 had a certain standard, but we've not kept pace with inflation, and therefore the money in their pocket now goes less far. So this, remember, these people are the lowest earners and the lowest incomes in our society. One of the criticisms of what went before on the cost of living crisis was that much of the weight was given to taxpayers. Taxpayers are not the poorest people in our society. People on income support, that support is literally a safety net for them. They are the poorest in society, and that's exactly where we should be directing the maximum aim we can. So if we examine in percentage terms, how come we miss the 16%? We get that basic rates for an adult have only gone up by 8%, so half the amount required to keep pace with inflation. For single parents, only 6%, so even less. For the first child, 22%, that's above income support. And I may as well take the time to say, and that came about how? That came about because in my very brief existence on the Social Security panel, working for the Minister, I suggested that we ought to put our money where our mouth is in treating young people and children, but above all else. And I said £5 for the first child would do exactly that. And so they got extra, and they've just kept pace with income support. And as we go through these 5 basic components, we get the subsequent child, the second child, third child, 8% increase. Again, householders, 8% increase. And so we've fallen quite significantly behind where we should be in terms of making sure that we don't let our support atrophy and just disappear. And that often happens. People think we've done something about that, so we can just leave it alone and rest. We don't have to do it again. We don't have to do it in 10 years' time. We don't have to do it in 5 years' time. That's not true. So what do we have? We have an increase in adult component from £110 to £115.80, an increase of £4.50. £4.50 a week for being an adult on income support. Doesn't sound like an awful lot. But if that's your last £4.50 on a Friday night, then it's very important, because you may not be able to eat or heat your room under those conditions. For a single parent, the increase is less, only £2.26, but nonetheless valid. For the first child, £4.74. And again, that £4.74 doesn't sound like much, but if it's your last £4.74, it's very, very important indeed. And believe you me, that's exactly what happens to some people. Budget as they may, they end up on a Friday or whatever without money in their pocket until the next payment comes. Second child, £4. And finally, the householder, in order to keep his household together, £3. A small increase for each of those in terms of their income support. And this may be, as people have said, income support which is used to prop up earnings. Not necessarily for those out of work, for those who don't work, for those who cannot work, although it is for those who cannot work. Those in work, there's the top-up. To meet the basic standards that we as a society say should be maintained. Maintained over time, maintained in value. And that's what my proposition does. It says, pay attention to the RPI, keep to the RPI. That's the marker that tells you you're having a real increase and not something that might otherwise be not enough in order to survive. And the case made by the Minister and his Assistant Minister that what we are proposing will make a difference could not be more valid. We must, as they have said, must act to help the vulnerable. And it would help if we could accurately plot, and we have done, what that rise should be. That's the rise which actually, in real terms, helps the vulnerable. The proposal from the department, from the Minister, is laudable, but too low. There's an extra amount of money in there, which is not an enormous amount. My estimate of the additional costs for this particular move is around £2 million, which sounds a lot, but it's £2 million on between 80 and 90 million. So it's actually a small proportion. And I believe that our society, we should be meeting that absolute level of RPI in order that nobody falls yet further behind on their income, and that people are not increased, but people can survive on that level, on those levels, and that the Minister's view is wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Is amendment seconded? Thank you. Does any member speak on the amendment? Minister.
May I respond, sir?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. As is quite clear, Deputy Southern's amendment proposes a much higher increase to some of the components of income support. This is an unfunded change that my officers calculate will add 2.7 million to the cost of my proposals, but does not establish where that money would come from. Which areas would be cut to fund those increases? The answer to this question isn't clear, and I don't think it's clear from the amendment. Nor is it clear why the amendment chooses the level components from 2014, nor is there any evidence that the 2014 rates are relevant to today's issues. There have been significant changes made to income support since 2014, which now provides extra support to families and to the many people...
Sorry, Minister, there's some music. Yes, well, you need to make a £10 contribution, Deputy Howell, in the usual way. Yes, Minister.
I'll start my sentence. There have been significant changes to income support since 2014, which now provides extra support to families and to the many people who use income support to supplement their own wages, pension or maintenance income. We are no longer comparing like with like. Since the start of income support, the disregard against earned income has increased from 6% to 26%. This is a huge change in the support given to working households, who today keep 26 pence in every pound they earn. In 2014, it was 20%. The same disregard is applied to old age pension and maintenance income. An extra payment has been created for the first child in a household to target extra support to families with children. This benefit did not exist prior to 2018. From late 2020, income support families have benefited from the Health Access Scheme, which provides subsidised GP visits with surgery visits free to under 17s. And today, I am proposing an above inflation increase for carers and people who live in hostel accommodation, as well as an increase to private sector rental rates and a general increase to all components to reflect the 10.4% RPI. We are meeting the current RPI figures now. The rising cost of living will affect every person in Jersey, every taxpayer, every government employee, every government department. We must make careful decisions now because we will be paying for them in the future. I asked officers to carry out careful modelling to cost and budget our proposed increases. I believe they are fair and proportionate response to the rising costs. And I would also remind members that we have provided further support to those in low incomes via the various measures in the mini-budget. We have also confirmed that to the extent further support is needed next year, then we will bring forward further proposals. In particular, by the end of this year, we will be publishing details of a scheme to help those families who have less than 5 years residency in Jersey. And if we need to continue community cost bonus or COLTS, we will give that fair consideration. Deputy Southern's report does not consider in any detail the cost or funding of his proposals. I believe that Deputy Southern did not seek advice from my officers on the cost of the proposals before lodging his amendments. His proposals have a total cost of £10.3 million a year. This is £3.5 million above the cost of my original proposals and £2.7 million above my own amendments. My proposals fully reflect the cost of living challenges that low-income families are facing today, with components uprated by 10.4% over the last 12 months. The Deputy's proposed rates increase a range of components by 14.9%, with no explanation as to why this extra uplift is required, other than a comparison which doesn't seem to hold good with 2014. It's clear that a large additional uplift on top of the planned increase would require significant additional funding and amendment to the government plan. None of these important considerations are set out in the Deputy's report. We all have a duty to the taxpayer to be clear as to the cost of our proposals and to explain the consequences of extra spending in a particular area. The Deputy's proposed extra £2.7 million a year is a considerable amount, and his summing up, I hope the Deputy will explain how this extra funding can be achieved on a sustainable basis. But I urge members to reject this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Mezek.
Thank you, sir. And just to very quickly touch upon a point that the Minister made towards the end of her speech there about us having a duty to be clear about how we're spending taxpayers' money. I'm sorry to use the opportunity to say it would be good if there were much greater detail beneath the heads of expenditure in government plans so that we could be much clearer about how we're spending public money, because it's certainly not clear enough as it currently stands, and that makes these debates harder, and it makes it harder for all members of this Assembly, whether you're part of the executive or not, to go through with a magnifying glass and find those pennies and where they're being spent to make sure we're getting best value for money, and where there are sensible transfers that can be made from some areas where perhaps we're spending too much and allocate them to other areas where they'd make a more significant impact. So that point is absolutely right, but it would have been good to see that in the government plan so more members would be empowered to make arguments one way or another on that. So immediately before the debate on this amendment, we had a debate on the principles of this proposition, that principle being that it is right now that we should uprate income support components to take into account inflation, and we all accepted that principle unanimously. We did so, sir, because it's a good principle. It's the right principle. In fact, it's such a good principle, I think we ought to be doing it every year. And what Deputy Southern's amendment seeks to do is to make up for lost ground for those years where we haven't done that. So, as Deputy Southern said, this proposition and the Minister's subsequent amendment to update them with the new RPI figures is absolutely laudable. It's what we should be doing right at this moment, and that proposition will have our wholehearted support. But Deputy Southern has sought to use this as an opportunity to highlight the fact that for some of the poorest people in our society, since 2014, life has got more difficult for them because we haven't, in previous years, been abiding by the principle we've just unanimously accepted, which is that we ought to uprate these, taking into account RPI, to look after those people. So I have to confess that I actually felt very angry when I read the comments that were lodged to Deputy Southern's amendment, because it took me back in time to 2015 and the start of 2016 as well. I was a relatively new member of the Assembly at the time, and I remember one of my worst days in politics being sat in this chamber when we debated the medium-term financial plan of that year, which gave the green light for cuts of £10 million to the support we pay out for people. I believed that was morally the wrong thing to do at the time, and it led to me spending a significant amount of my time as a constituency representative sat in Philip Lefevre House with constituents, often as they were crying their eyes out to be told that the way that the rules had been changed to meet the needs of those cuts, they were going to be worse off. And often they were people who had no agency to increase their income from any other source because they were disabled or because they were particularly elderly or something like that, and so they were made worse off in those times. And these comments do not reflect that. So they point out that because of the changes of some rules to do with disregards, some people may well have been better off as a result of those changes. But it doesn't change the underlying fact that £10 million of support was cut from that budget. That was coming from somewhere, and it was coming from the pockets of people who were made worse off by that. So what Deputy Southern seeks to do, and this is the rationale, I think, for it going back to 2014, because that was the era in which those decisions were being made, it aims to make up for that lost ground and to say, great, we can make people better off now this year by RPI, which puts them, which keeps them at an equal position for this year, but we haven't done it in previous years, and if now can be an opportunity to make up for that lost ground and help those people, then why not? Why not use this at that moment? Or do we say, okay, those previous years were a write-off. Those people will be worse off because of those decisions, and, oh well, we're just happy to put up with that. I think Deputy Southern is raising an absolutely legitimate point by giving us the opportunity to say, okay, we have looked at lots of other measures to be taken in the mini-budget and other places as well to try to make people better off because of the very difficult pressures that people are feeling right now. But we have to have a more rounded view of those who are the worst off in our society and the issues that have contributed to their being worse off, because they're not always the same as the issues that affect other people whose incomes come from other places. So, and this point about where's the money coming from, I find that frustrating, because we have a government that has quite rightly brought forward proposals to increase support for people. We never ask that question of them. Where's the money coming from? We say the need is too great, the moment is too urgent, that we're prepared to find that money because it's the right thing to do. And Deputy Southern seeks to do that. There are plenty of ways that we can look at how funding from the Social Security Fund and the support that goes out to people from the government, whether that's in income support, whether it's in the state pension, or other things. We can have plenty of discussions about the sustainability of that funding, and no doubt we will. I think the Minister's alluded to those reviews going on in the future. But for the here and now, to try to make people actually better off, or not even better off, but at least even to where they were or where they would have been if we'd have applied the principle of this proposition in previous years gone by. Well, you know, if it's good enough for this year, why wasn't it good enough for those previous years? I commend Deputy Southern for bringing this forward, and I will certainly be supporting it. And I consider it a deep matter of regret that previous assemblies and previous governments didn't have the foresight to try to keep up with inflation previously, because believe you me, it caused some real suffering and hardship that many people seem to forget happened in those dark years of our political history.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any member wish to speak on this amendment? Deputy Tadier?
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Just missed out to Deputy Joseph there. But let's... Thank you, sir. So the reason that I'm quite comfortable supporting this is because the bottom line is it's going to put money into the pockets of people in our society who need it the most. That's in a nutshell, but very simply, the best way to explain it. There are other good reasons, of course. Now, it seems that the lines, sometimes we think the lines in these kind of debates are fairly well drawn, to the point where very few people seem prepared to speak on this kind of debate. I hope that's not the case. And I would also hope that members have actually taken the time to read what's a fairly manageable and well-presented proposition by Deputy Southern, which sets out the case very well. It's not simply a case of saying, I'm inclined to vote against this anyway, and the words that I've heard from the Minister sound very plausible, and that's good enough for me, that's eased my conscience. Because the reality of it is, in this whole package, which is very necessary, as I alluded to earlier, sir, we are giving millions of pounds away to landlords, whether we like it or not. That's just the reality of our housing market. We have a housing market, and this is relevant, so I'll bring it back to the point. We have a housing market which is such that it takes a big chunk of people's disposable income every month, and that's people who are on income support, people who are not on income support. At least when they're in social housing, that money gets reinvested into the system. So if we put the components up and it ends up getting spent in Andiam or trust housing, that's okay, because it's kind of wooden dollars and we can use it to reinvest and maintain buildings. When you give a landlord millions of pounds in income support and tax increases, there's absolutely no money, first of all, that money stays on the island. It may not. Some of that may well go to pay for a single pensioners to assist with their pension income and help them to survive. They might also be finding life difficult. But it also goes to the professional and multiple and corporate landlords, again, who may not even be in the island. And why do I say that? I say it by in stark contrast. We've got a proposition here from Deputy Southern. Now, I noticed the headline figure that the Minister gives, and no doubt Deputy Southern will address this. Oh, you know, first of all, the alarm bells, this is £10 million extra. Well, it's not £10 million extra. The Minister's proposals are already about £7 million. And Deputy Southern's goes a little bit further by saying if we target this, we can actually give a real terms increase to the people who most need it in our society, who will spend it. And let's look exactly at what he's talking about. Again, in real terms, just to look at one of the components, you take the single parent component. In 2014, the single parent component was £40.39 a week. In 2022, it was still £40.39 a week. What the Minister's proposing here is to increase that by just over £2.50, I think it's £2.60 to £42.98. That represents a 6% increase. But Deputy Southern's told us that the actual RPI increase during those 8 years was 16%. So he's simply saying that that should be increased to a more realistic figure. And that kind of pattern you can see through all of the components that he's targeted, whether it's the adult component, the first child, the further child, or the household component. All of that money is going to be going in and going out. And I think some of us, I hope, live in the real world, so I'm sure all of us live in a real world. We all live in the world. But the experiences that we have before we get to this place are going to be completely varied and different. And that's great. You know, that's part of the diversity that we have within our assembly. But increasingly, we look at well, not increasingly, but just generally in our assembly, like in so many assemblies around the world, we are not representative of the public. You know, our spending power as individuals and our experiences and the circles that we move in might be completely different to other individuals. And I'm reminded of the word, it came to me in French initially, la précarité, sir. In English, we might call it a precarious existence. And there are so many people in our current society who live, we might call it a marginal existence. They live hand to mouth, and they are precarious in their lifestyle. So even if you have a 26% disregard, as if 6% was meaningless, 26% is still a long way off, I think, where we should be. We need to be much more proactive in how we think about giving cash allowances, I think, to individuals in that scenario. But the reality is, if you're on income support and you're struggling and you go out to work and earn £10 an hour, you get to keep an extra £2.60 of it. Whoopee-doo. And I don't say that in any kind of blasé way, sir, but that's the reality, that you might have £2.60 going into your wallet, but if the increases that you're seeing and have seen in the cost of living over an 8-year period are actually eroding that £2.60 an hour, then you can see how people might be making very tough choices, especially when you start to figure in things like childcare, long-term care for an elderly relative, which you might not be getting a component for necessarily. Those are the real life scenarios that we're talking about. And by giving this money, it might sound like a lot, but those millions pale into insignificance when we think about millions of pounds that are spent on infrastructure in Jersey that's been delayed, etc. I think this is something that we should be not just considering supporting, but we should be supporting wholeheartedly.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. I'm not really inclined to go into too much in the area of the position of landlords or talk about magic money trees. I do feel that perhaps government's response to Deputy Southern's proposition could be a bit clearer. For starters, when I mentioned the removal of colts, I would point out that recipients of the Pension Plus scheme, or who can claim under it, can actually claim colts even if they're not on income support. There are certain distinctions, I think, even in terms of the provision of income support that I personally am still trying to work through. For example, a house owner could be claiming income support but There are people in this island who are on a very low income, who have to pay rent, who don't claim income support. There are some inequities that really need to be addressed in the current social security system. And although I know the Minister is looking into this, I find it unsatisfactory that they remain. In respect of this kind of question, where is the money coming from? I do look at the response of the Minister for Treasury and Resources to Deputy Kofash's written question 2402022, which does refer to some sort of surplus, not a huge one, but one probably that could fund that. And indeed other, perhaps, measures that even I might be tempted to bring in terms of the Pension Plus proposition. I think it would be useful for a minister to respond to that, because there is a noticeable surplus from which this could arguably be paid. I'm still sort of open to persuasion on either side, so I look forward to a little more debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Joseph.
Thank you, sir. I want to agree with the Social Security Minister in respect of her observations about and her challenge to Deputy Southern about where the money is coming from. And I would point out respectfully, sir, that this is not the Assembly of 2015, it's the Assembly of 2022. And unfortunately, unlike the Assembly in 2015, it isn't a multi-year budget. We have a single-year budget, we're only 1 year ahead. But what the Deputy is actually saying is he's saying that we're going to effectively change these proposals. It's not just 1 year that the Minister should, with respect, sir, be asking the Deputy where it's going to come from, where it's going to come from in subsequent years. So we've heard this morning that we've had a hospital debate where we've had a statement from the Infrastructure Minister, where the Infrastructure Minister has said that the extant decision of the State Assembly to build a hospital cannot be built. This Assembly is going to have to find a solution to this hospital challenge, because the money, maybe it was there, but it certainly isn't there now because it wasn't borrowed. Moreover, the hospital is going to cost at least as much as it was before, and the arrangements that have been done, which I found absolutely extraordinary. We're not having a hospital debate, but it speaks to the issue of where the money's coming from. This Assembly has got some challenges. We've seen a UK government which has failed in relation to a mini-budget. We didn't fail in terms of a mini-budget, sir, because we had a fully costed mini-budget. It was fully costed, it was explained, it was debated. I think it was within 2 weeks of the new arrival of the government that we brought forward a mini-budget. It went through this Assembly and it was approved, because we are the government, we are the island of sound money. We didn't have a situation in the UK where we had an unfunded set of proposals, which then, fortunately, we don't have borrowing, sir, so we didn't have bond markets going completely crazy. We have a situation where we have an appropriately balanced approach. The Minister has explained in detail, both in her opening submissions and in the later submissions, the fact that she has made an improvement to the support arrangements that are there. I don't understand, sir, why Deputy Southern is going back to 2014. Deputy Mezek spoke that he was unhappy in 2015 with the medium-term financial plan. I need to ask the members of the Reform Party why they're choosing to go, I've got optics backwards, sir, with benefit of hindsight. We know that in the past we needed to make some economies and some efficiencies to put ourselves on a sound footing where we could afford the income support budget generally and make income support affordable. Deputy Southern is asking us to go further than that. I don't quite know what the gesticulation of the Deputy Mezek is, sir, but that seems like an improper suggestion. We are an States Assembly that needs to make decisions where we actually put forward a proposition, where we actually find out where the money's coming from. Can Deputy Southern, in his summing up, say why he has chosen back to 2014, why isn't it last year, and what's he going to do going forward? Where's the money coming from this year? Any member of this Assembly bringing forward something should come forward with a solution. But it's not just 1 year, it's actually going to be actually a permanent increase in expenditure. And that seems to be unsound. It's not sound decision-making. And I haven't heard a persuasive argument As much as I want to support, as all members of this Assembly want to support people on low incomes, where is the money going to come from? Because I'm afraid the magic money tree never existed, it doesn't exist, and members who bring forward proposals to spend money need to identify where it's going to come from, and not just 1 year, but multiple years, even though we don't have a medium-term financial plan. The medium-term financial plan that Deputy Mezek mentioned in apparently in advancing the case for Deputy Southern was the following medium-term financial plan that needed to make some economies and some efficiencies to meet public sector expenditure. I asked Deputy Southern in his summing up, why take 2014? Why these amendments? Why only these components? And how is it going to be paid for? Not just this year, but where's he going to find the money from in subsequent years? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Rob Ward.
Thank you, sir. And I'm pleased to follow that because yet again, we're in a position where the same argument is repeated again and again and again. And if my computer was quicker, I would have called out the standing order on that. Unfortunately, I don't know off by heart. We hear again and again and again the same old tired arguments from government when they simply don't want something to happen. Because what they want to do is say that we are doing stuff, we are doing things for those least well off in our society. But when push comes to shove and we have to actually pay up for that, you don't want to do it because it's not your priority. And let's look at this properly, shall we? Let's look at the actual amount. It's about £5 in one of the components. £5. That's going to make a significant difference to someone's life. How many members in this Assembly at this moment in their lives will £5 make a significant difference to your life week in, week out? Very few of us, because we're in a very different position. But what we have is a responsibility to the members in our society to ensure that we do everything we can to make sure that we help those least able in our society. And I've probably said this before, sir, but not in this debate, so I think I can say it again. I think we should judge our society and how we support the least able in our society. Not those who own the biggest yachts in the harbour, but those who are most vulnerable and how we support them. And that's what this is about. And Deputy Southern, throughout his entire career in this Assembly, has been a voice piece for those who are least able and most vulnerable. And whatever you think about, whatever your preconceptions are of anyone in this Assembly, please remember that that's a hugely consistent approach. And I respect that enormously, because that's somebody who actually talks about with real principle about what they want to do. And so I make this point. If you feel that these things just shouldn't happen because there's some issue with somebody beyond income support because they're there because of whatever reason your preconception is, then don't vote for any of this. Never vote for an increase. But if you feel and you understand that there are vulnerable members in our society who need the support week in, week out of social security, some who may not be able to work or may be in a position in their lives for a short time or a long time where they cannot support themselves in a way that you and I are lucky enough to be able to do, then look at this as an increase. And what Deputy Southern has done very successfully from 2014, and he could have gone back further. I'm sure he could have gone back further and we'd have had a larger increase to say, has this tracked inflation in that time? The answer is no. So what do? Well, that's track inflation in that time. So people most vulnerable in our society in that position now are at least tracking inflation. And therefore, that £5 increase. I'll go back to the components in this proposition, if I can find it. It's £5 for an adult. It's £3 something for a single parent. £3. You're lucky to get a cup of coffee for that in St Helier. £3 a week. And the profit motive, the profit margin on that would be enormous. That's okay. However, we're arguing in this Assembly, and some people sat here will say, no, we can't afford to give a single parent an extra £3 a week because there's some sort of principle behind it. The principle is that we are losing track of our responsibility in this Assembly for the most vulnerable in our society. It is as simple as that. And so every time we go through these convoluted discussions about, the money's going to come from here, or it's going to come from there, the amount that we're spending on our social security and has not tracked inflation. We are leaving the most vulnerable society in our society even more vulnerable because we're not willing to take that on the chin at this point. And as Deputy Scott said, there was surpluses. And what I was hoping from this government, it keeps talking about being different, is an enabling government. That rather than when it suits, will use every opportunity in the book to either stop debate or to oppose a simple change for financial reasons, which will then be swapped around to say that actually we can afford to do that because that's our wish to do it. In this assembly where we talk about consensus, that lack of acceptance of someone else's proposition troubles me. And I really hope that members can sit up today and look at what this actually means. Because none of us are in a position where we have to live on £115 a week. None of us. None of us are in a position, if we're single parents, of having to live on 45.24 as that component per week. That's the reality of low-income survival on this island. And that's what we're looking at today. So I'm going to ignore the commentary because I'm good at that. I've spent 25 years doing it. And I will say again, sir, to finish, please look at what we're actually voting on today. A really purely insignificant amount of money for an individual in you and I terms. But for the people that we're talking about, it makes a significant difference. And I'd like to finish, sir, by thanking Deputy Southern for his commitment throughout his entire time in this assembly, for those who are on the lowest incomes and fighting consistently, regardless of the attitude that is sometimes shown towards him by some in the assembly, and keeping going and saying, no, this is the right thing to do, it's the right time to do it, and we're certainly possible to do it. So I urge you to support this amendment, and let's actually enable some real change, rather than just talking about it for once. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Minister?
Thank you, sir. I would just like to make a couple of points.
Well, you can't, because you've spoken in this debate already.
Oh, sorry, okay. I feel Deputy Ward has been misleading.
Well, I agree. You've spoken in this debate already, and if you wanted to raise a point of clarification, and Deputy Ward had given way, then that's the time to do that was during his speech. Yes, Deputy Brenner.
Thank you, sir. There's a bit of a current creeping into this debate that suggests that the only way to show you care for people who are on lower incomes is to support Deputy Southern's amendment. And I think it's easy to make that case if you isolate this debate from the wider picture. So I've actually got three reasons for voting against this amendment. But my overall point is that I reject the contention that we have allowed benefits as a whole to the least well-off to fall behind, not when we consider the whole picture. So Deputy Southern's amendment seeks to correct what the Deputy sees as a growing injustice. But as the Minister has made clear, the baseline comparison is faulty. There are other benefits that have increased. Disregard has increased. The Health Access Scheme has been introduced to subsidise health costs. The amendment is to make up for lost ground, which doesn't exist. It's also important to recognise that we have, through the mini-budget, increased payments to the least well-off. I'm proud of what this government has done to help the least well-paid and the least well-off. It is not the case that this government does not care. We have made a big intervention, we've acted early, and we're continuing to act now through the Minister's actions. But the final point is that, as Deputy Iyer has said, we have to balance our support for the least well-off with what we can afford. Deputy Mezek questions the legitimacy of challenging this amendment from the point of view of where does the money come from, because government measures aren't held to the same standard. I disagree. We are. As ministers, we have to produce a balanced budget. If we want extra funding, we have to say where the money will come from. We cannot come to this assembly with a budget that doesn't balance. So that is something that we do. The point is that £2.7 million in extra cost has not been funded. So I think the key point I would want to make is that when you look at this as a complete package of measures that this government is taking, we are taking seriously our commitments to the least well-off. It's very important to me personally that we do that, and I'm proud of what we do. Thank you.
So may I make a point of order then?
Well, if it's something that requires ruling from the chair, yes.
Sir, I just feel that Deputy Ward's comment focused very much on what is available to a single parent, and what I heard, and which other members may have heard, that the only thing a single parent is going to derive from the regulations as tabled by me is £3 a week, and that is simply not true.
That's not a point of order.
Okay.
And I don't think I'm suggesting he's deliberately misled the Assembly. Yes, Chief Minister.
Thank you, sir. And I'm pleased to follow Deputy Renouf, who spoke most eloquently and I think illustrated exactly the sentiment of the government. We have spent days locked in a room contemplating how we can do as much as we possibly can within a balanced budget. And it wasn't an easy process. And so I simply, in following on from Deputy Renouf's points, which were very well made, wanted to identify exactly where the issue comes. And of course, we must not forget that the Social Security Minister is bringing a suite of measures here, which follows on from the mini-budget, where she quickly and deftly found solutions to the issue of the cost of living. And we have made a commitment of continuing to look at that and to react and to act as appropriately as these challenging times follow. But in doing so, we have to maintain a balanced budget. And so the issue with this particular proposal from Deputy Southern is that whilst we may be looking at a balanced budget next year and also another modest balanced budget in 2024, when we get to the line in 2025, sir, there is a figure of £0.1 million. That is how balanced our budget is in 2025. Therefore, we would have to find something to stop doing, something to stop spending on in order to make this additional payment. And I think that identifies exactly the problem. We cannot commit without finding that solution to this level of additional expenditure because we would be locked in on a year-by-year basis. So that is not to say that we are not listening to the issues that have been well made and the arguments have been clearly put. We, of course, understand, and that's why the Social Security Minister has brought a suite of measures that exceed RPI without housing costs, because she recognises that it's important to do as much as we possibly can, but we have to do it within our spending envelope. And so if this very issue is one that resonates so clearly with members that we want to achieve the additional spending and we want to look back, and I have to remind you that the Minister has already committed to reviewing income support payments and to looking carefully at that, so that will be done in the proper way that members would expect. But and if that is not enough for members, then perhaps we can use this very issue to focus our minds on what we can stop doing, what we can simplify doing, to cut our cloth accordingly, so that we can do, exactly as Deputy Ward explained, what is really in each of our reasons for being here in this room, to consider how best we collect revenue and how best we distribute that revenue that benefits all islanders, all aspects of island life that we want to do our very best for. And so I ask you all to help us on that journey, because we do have to find a solution. And unless we do have that solution, we are unable to make the level of commitment that is being asked of us in this particular debate today.
Thank you, Chief Minister. Does any other member to speak on this amendment? Deputy Andrews.
Thank you, sir. I think to begin with, we need to actually understand the households that we are speaking of. They are part of the lower deciles in our society, and we need to ensure that actually they are maintained in real terms. And actually we just need to see there will be a subtle decrease in terms of their purchasing power. So essentially their ability to consume will still be okay, but it will just be slightly below what it should be if we're looking at a real term increase. For me, it's important, I think, from the perspective of being a backbencher, there is 28 of us, and if we are to be bringing forward amendments or potentially propositions to the Assembly, we have to be in dialogue with one another, because I think with the mini-budget, for instance, what was actually really shown is there were probably too many amendments, and actually we were looking potentially at a primary budget deficit for the year. So I think moving forward, we essentially have to be engaging with one another and communicating with one another more often, and that will be if it's for a political party or for all the independents. I think in this case, yes, some members have actually brought forward to the attention of the Assembly some, in principle, components that actually are very true in terms of, yes, we do need to actually ensure we are justifying how we can fund this. I will be supporting the amendment, but I must say, sir, moving forward, there needs to be more clarity, because absolutely we do need to actually be justifying where the source of funds are coming from. We cannot be relying upon economic profit and corporate profit where there's going to be inflation, obviously generating additional revenue for the government. I don't think that is really a justifiable reason. It has been often the case, though, sir, that some members will use that as a reason for the government having additional revenue, but also, sir, private sector debt will be increasing as a consequence, and that's also something that is very concerning, and I think all members should be very concerned in that respect. So, sir, yeah, absolutely, I will be supporting the amendment. However, moving forward in future, I think as a backbench, we need to be perhaps a bit more collegiate, and also we need to be communicating to ensure that actually if we are bringing forward proposals, we are not bringing forward proposals where actually we could end up being in a primary budget deficit for the year, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone wish to speak on this amendment? I call upon Deputy Sutherland to reply.
Thank you, sir. And I've enjoyed today's debate, even if it reminded me of many debates in the past, including some recent ones. Once again, we ignore those most vulnerable in our society. We have done something towards their benefit, but I would argue not enough. The fact is, we have let income support fall behind the cost of living. When we debated the cost of living crisis, we had plenty of money to dash around there, at least £7 million spent, on which I'm saying for an extra £2 million and £2 million on an overall budget, which is majority about rents. And if anybody doesn't believe me, then look at the answers to our question time, where we see, well, it's about that one there, a rented 2-bed flat suffering from the rent, suffering from 29% increase over those years that I've been illustrating. 29% increase, and still climbing. What will happen to this small amount of cash that I'm saying we should be giving to the vulnerable income support? Where's it going to go? It's going to go into landlords' pockets. No doubt about it. That's where it'll go, straight into the pocket and out again to the landlord. That is the reality of our society. So anything we can do to make living in our society more tolerable is valid. maybe it means that people can just about cling on to their housing. Maybe they can meet their needs just about, but it is about the just about managing. It's also the repeat of the phrase, and Senator Joseph, as was Tom Passé, Deputy Joseph, did his usual, no argument, just repetition. Where's the money? Where's the money coming from? Where's the money coming from? Where's the money coming from? Where's the money tree? Where's the money tree? Where's the money tree? It wears you down in the end, because that's what you hear. And you hear that permanent, where's the money when we sent back some monies into the central coffers from income support? Why? Because fewer people were on the island and fewer people were out of work. So claims went down. So where's the money? For example, there's one source of the money. And I was asked again, why this arbitrary figure of 2004? 2014, thank you. Deputy Joseph. 2014. You still put me off. Can we go back further? And the answer is yes, we can. We can, because I've been there. I was there in 2002. I don't think Senator Joseph was, Deputy Joseph was, but I was there in 2002 when we made income support the safety net, and we built it. And we built it back in 2002 on the basis of welfare, used to come to the parishes, welfare plus 10%. So we could go back to welfare plus 10%, if we knew what welfare would be, inflated. But to suggest that we could do welfare plus is mistaken. Okay, we've settled down, we have income support components that seem to match our need. Absolutely. Further on, I'm told, well, they're already doing things for those on unequal incomes, on lower incomes. For example, we devised the health and health access scheme. Who brought that? My colleague and myself. We brought that. And that's the single thing that we've done that can most impact people's lives and make their lives better. To give people healthier, to give people cheap access to GPs. But who's done that? People like me on this side of the benches. Because that initiative from ministers has been missing. And our reply to the Chief Minister, who says, we found the money for £7 million. We haven't got a penny more for 2.7 million extra on that, which would be the fair division of what's going on. And we've got a large-scale, this happens time and time again, a large-scale review of benefits. And what will that do? Will that produce a single pound in anybody's pocket? It won't. A review, you can't eat a review. And to Deputy Andrews, I say, engage not with ourselves. Don't be self-regarding in the sense of how does this go down well with fellow members. Look outside. Look outside at voters and the poor people that are living out there with high rents and low wages and insecure work. And say, how does what I'm doing today go with them? And at which point, at that point, I'll close and call for the appel, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. The appel has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. Voting on the amendment to the first regulation. Ask the greffier to open the voting. If all members have the opportunity of casting their votes, then ask the greffier to close the voting. I can announce that the amendment has been rejected. 14 votes pour, 29 votes contra, and 1 abstention.
May we have the 14, please? Sir?
Yes.
Those members voting for the Conotava, St Martin, St Clement and St Saviour, Deputies Southern, Tadier, Mesic, Coles, Porre, Catherine Curtis, Feltham, Kovac and Andrews, and Deputy Scott abstained.
We now resume the debate on the regulations in second reading. Does anyone wish to speak on the regulations? Accordingly, I close the debate. Is the appel called for? The appel has been called for. I invite members to return to their seats. I ask the greffier to open the voting on the regulations as amended by the Minister in second reading. All members have the opportunity of casting their votes. Then I ask the greffier to close the voting, and I can announce that the regulations have been adopted unanimously in second reading, 44 votes pour. Minister, do you wish to propose the regulations in third reading?
Yes, sir. May I propose the regulations en bloc, please?
Yes. Are the regulations seconded in third reading? Does anyone wish to speak in third reading on the regulations as adopted in second reading? Accordingly, I close the debate. Is the appel called for? Appel has been called for. I invite members to return to their seats, and I invite the greffier to open the voting on the regulations in third reading. All members have the opportunity of casting their votes. Then I ask the greffier to close the voting, and I can announce that the regulations have been adopted unanimously in third reading, 44 votes pour. The next item is the draft Health and Safety Appeal Tribunal appointment of Chair and Deputy Chair, lodged by the Minister for Social Security. For the purpose of this debate, the main responder will be Deputy Southern on behalf of the Health and Social Security Scrutiny Panel. I invite the greffier to read the proposition.
The states were asked to decide whether they are of opinion, in accordance with the Health and Safety at Work Appeal Tribunal Jersey Regulations 1989, to appoint for a period of 3 years the following persons as Chair and Deputy Chair of the Health and Safety at Work Appeal Tribunal to determine appeals against prohibition and improvement notices served by health and safety inspectors and decisions by the Minister on licensing provisions under the law, commencing immediately. Advocate Cyril Whelan, Chair. Advocate Neil MacDonald, Deputy Chair.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. I'm very pleased to recommend that the Assembly appoints Advocate Cyril Whelan and Advocate Neil MacDonald as Chair and Deputy Chair respectively of the Health and Safety at Work Appeal Tribunal. The Health and Safety at Work Appeal Tribunal hears and determines appeals against prohibition and improvement notices served by health and safety inspectors and appeals in connection with licensing provisions. The tribunal is constituted under the Health and Safety at Work Appeal Tribunal Jersey Regulations 1989, and in accordance with that law must consist of a chair, a deputy chair and 2 other members. Both the chair and deputy chair are to be an advocate or solicitor of the Royal Court of not less than 7 years standing. The previous chair was in post since 2019, and I thank them for their term of office. Details in relation to the professional background of the nominees is included in the report, and members will see that if appointed, the nominees will each bring a great deal of skill and experience to these roles. I have no hesitation in recommending the appointments to the Assembly, and I make the proposition.
Thank you, Minister. Is the proposition seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does anyone wish to speak on the proposition? No. Accordingly, I close the debate. Are members content to adopt this proposition on a standing vote? I call those in favour to please show. Thank you very much. Accordingly, the proposition is adopted. That concludes public business for this meeting, and I invite the Chair of PPC to propose the arrangement of public business for future meetings. Madam
Thank
Chair.
you, sir. We only have 2 sittings before Christmas, and the next sitting is on 22nd of November. 2 propositions have been lodged since the publication of the Consolidated Order Paper, Draft Food Jersey Law P105 and Rent Control Tribunal Chair Member Nominations P106 2022. Both have been listed for the meeting in December. A second amendment to the Reinstatement of Senators P79 from Deputy Scott has also been lodged today for debate at the next meeting. At the next meeting, the Assembly will consider a number of propositions, including the Common Strategic Policy and a proposition for the reinstatement of senators. Members should therefore expect to meet for longer than we have this week, probably up to 3 days. Given that at the December meeting we will be considering the government plan, I would like to propose that the Assembly meet on Monday afternoon, the 12th of December, to take questions and statements with public business to begin on Tuesday morning, 13th of December. Moving to the Monday afternoon would affect submission deadlines for oral questions and lodging deadlines, which the State's Gref will advise members of. I would urge members to keep the whole week of the 12th of December free for the States for debating the government plan. Thank you, sir. And I would like to propose starting the States on Monday the 12th.
Did you say at 9:30 a.m., did you say?
No, the afternoon, please, sir.
At 2:15.
Yes, please, sir.
Thank you very much. Is public business seconded?
So may I just advance a view that in view of the business on the 22nd of November, where we have the Common Strategic Policy, arguably that is the main set-piece item for the government and members indeed as well, who obviously may want to make amendments. Can I suggest that that is taken first item of business on that sitting?
All right. Well, that's a different proposition. Can we start with the proposition of the Chair of PPC to commence on the Monday, the 12th of December at 2:15? Is that seconded? Does anyone wish to speak on that matter? Accordingly, can I assume that has been adopted? Oh, yes, Deputy Alves, you wish to
Sorry,
speak.
sir. I just wanted to raise whether that is early enough for us to start to get through all the questions and all the questions with notice and without notice, because normally we carry on after the lunch break. So I don't know whether it may be advisable to maybe start a little bit earlier than 2:15, whether the chair would consider that. Thank you, sir.
Yes, Chair, Madam Chair.
I'm very happy to have an earlier start. I just thought it would give
Yes.
members the opportunity on the Monday morning to...
What do you have in mind?
I mean, I'm very happy to start at 9:30 on the Monday morning, and then we may finish earlier, by Thursday evening or something. But
Yes.
at least
all
it
right.
gives us time, and we won't have so many debates on how late we stay. So,
Yes,
thank you,
there needs
sir.
to be a degree of flexibility in terms of how we adopt this procedurally, but you're now suggesting we should start at 9:30 on the Monday. Is that seconded? Yes,
So
Deputy
I
Sadio.
don't think that was the intention of Deputy Alves, and we as St Brelard representatives have we keep Monday 12 till 1 for our surgeries every week, and I'm not sure who's up for that week, but it's. I think if we could start at 1:30, that's probably the earliest. 2 o'clock would, and also maybe whilst we're at it, so if we don't have statements being made on that session, I don't know if we can preclude that, but this is obviously what happens.
Does he make a proposition of 1:30, do you?
1:30, so I know it's splitting hairs, but half an hour really does make a difference
Yes.
from getting across the island.
Is that seconded? Yes, sir. And is that adopted? Thank you very much. So 1:30 on the Monday, the 12th, is when the Assembly will commence the December debate. Shall we return now to your proposition, Deputy Joseph, in relation to the Common Strategic Policy, or not?
Willingly so, in the hands of the Assembly. It was a constructive suggestion in order to deal with what is effectively the big set piece for this term of office. Common Strategic Policy, first item of business, seems entirely sensible, if I may say.
Yes.
Up in the hands of members.
Is that seconded?
Yeah, we haven't voted actually on it, have we? Sorry? Yes.
I'll let you do it. Stick with the agenda.
Well, Deputy Joseph, it appears that your proposition has effectively been won by standing orders, because Standing Order 31.2 provides that the first item of public business at a meeting wishes to be debated, unless the states decide otherwise, is C, a statement of the Common Strategic Policy of the Council of Ministers. So prima facie, that plan, the Common Strategic Policy, should be debated first, unless a proposition is made to the contrary.
Well, I stand corrected, sir. There's something in the grey matter after all. It seems that that was somewhere in my mind the first item that should be done, and so I'm happy
Yes,
to
so
withdraw my
unless
proposition,
the
sir.
Assembly resolves to the contrary, that will be the first item of public business. The Conotable St Martin.
Sir, I might be being pedantic, but should we vote on the start time as it was a proposition? Are we supposed to start vote on this? Or?
Well, no, I think
I've
there's
withdrawn
degree
the
of
proposition, sir.
flexibility, and the Assembly was content to proceed
Okay,
on the footing
thank
that
you.
will commence at 1:30 on the Monday in December. So does any other member wish to speak on the arrangement of future public business? If not, then the state stands adjourned until the 22nd of November.